Case number 22380. Have you heard of this case number? So the Supreme Court has basically put case number 22380 on their docket. So you're wondering, what is a Supreme Court docket? So according to supremecourt.gov, the Supreme Court's docket system contains information about cases both pending and decided that have been filed at the court. So in other words, a docket is like a list of things that the Supreme Court will go over, or cases that they will be going through. So Supreme Court case number 22380, to remove 388 office holders in the United States government. This case has been accepted in, or has been put on the Supreme Court's docket. Basically, they will be reviewed by the Supreme Court justices. Essentially, this court case involves the possible removal of a sitting president and vice president of the United States with members of the United States Congress. So I believe this is a related case to the 2020 election debacle, debate, in which a lot of people contest the validity of the 2020 elections. And this court case, if reviewed by the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court actually has the power to nullify the previous election. And if that's the case, all of the politicians that are sitting in office currently will be kind of kicked out because they're not valid office holders or holders of those positions, which includes the current president, vice president, and their staff. So according to this court case, it uncovers a serious national security breach that is unique and is of first impression. And due to the serious nature of this case, it involves the possible removal of a sitting president. So according to the document, questions that is presented, a serious conflict exists between decisions rendered from this court and the lower appeals court, along with constitutional provisions and statutes, in deciding whether or not the trial court has jurisdiction to try the merits of this case. This case uncovers a serious national security breach that is unique and is of first impression, and due to the serious nature of this case, it involves the possible removal of a sitting president and vice president of the United States, along with the members of the United States Congress, while deeming them unfit for ever holding office under federal, state, county, or local governments found within the United States of America. And at the same time, the trial court also has the authority to be validated by this court to authorize the swearing in of legal and rightful heirs of President and Vice President of the United States. That's a lot in that first two paragraphs of this case. What I got out of that is, if the Supreme Court deems the 2020 elections as invalid, so by their powers, they could kick out the legislative branch, all the people that fall under the legislative branch, and the executive branch. So essentially, Congress and the United States president and their cabinet. Continuing on. In addition, there are two doctrines that conflict with each other found in this case affecting every court in this country. These doctrines are known as the doctrine of equitable maxim and the doctrine of the object principle of justice. The equitable maxim created by this court, which the lower court used to dismiss this case, sets in direct violation of the object principle of justice, also partially created by this court and supported by other appeal courts and constitutional provisions. These conflicts call for the supervisory power of this court to resolve these conflicts, which has not but should be settled by this court without delay. So those are the last two paragraphs for the questions being presented in this case. So essentially, this goes back to the January 6th event, where there's a lot of claims that it was rigged and whatnot. There are supposed to be checks and balances that were supposed to be followed by the law. which wasn't followed by the lower courts. That's what I got out of interpreting this. So I guess supposedly the J6 events wasn't investigated thoroughly enough under the guy by the full extent of the law, and that the case is claiming that there was no real investigation by the courts, and since there was no real investigation behind the whole J6 events, and we just took, I guess, took media's word for it. I guess the duty now falls under the Supreme Court to run the investigation. Under the Supreme Court's investigations, they have the power to do all these things, which would be invalidating the 2020 elections, removing those people in power, and there's a possibility that Trump could be back as the temporary president as maybe new elections are administered, along with maybe the previous Congress body, possibly. So, with this being on the Supreme Court's docket for review and I guess consideration by the Supreme Court's justices, they will look at it without emotion and go through it by law, whatever is in the law books. So I don't think anything like this ever happened and in history. And this may be the very first time that something like this happened. And it's one of those I feel that will shake up this country. A lot of people will, if not already, a lot of people will be up in arms. I know there's this whole left versus right, red versus blue, which is stupid, I think, because we are one nation. Why would we want to be fighting each other over some small things that we've been, I guess, programmed? I guess it would be the word. But I think this is pretty significant that the Supreme Court will be looking into the January 6th election fraud. Um, whether you believe it was fraud or not, this will affect you in more ways than one, in ways that you could only imagine. So this is just my interpretation of reading this court case. This court case was brought to my attention, so I'm doing this quick video try to talk about it. Hopefully the background noise isn't too bad. It's currently raining. It's nice and cold here in the low 50s. We'll see what's gonna come out of this. If anything does come out, if not, then hey, business as usual. I'm not a lawyer. This is just my interpretation of this case that was shared to me. This is just my opinions and stuff. If you go to the Supreme Court's website and look up this case number 22380 and read it for yourself, you may understand it differently from my interpretation. But this is just my opinion and my interpretation of that case. Well, if anything, happy Thanksgiving and stay positive.